Hello and welcome to All Things Marketing with Gillian Rusike. This is a show that seeks to critique, analyze and celebrate marketing excellency in the country. We also profile trendsetters, new entrants as well as exits in the sector. We are coming to you live from ZTN Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe, and I'm joined in the studio by Zimbabwe Tourism Authority Chief Executive Muchanyuka. We do hope you will enjoy this informative and packed show where we will share her journey in the tourism sector thus far. Do not go anywhere. All Things Marketing. We'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marketing with Gillian Rusike, coming to you live from ZTN Studios. Before the break, I mentioned that we are joined in the studio by Miss Muchanyuka, who is the CEO, Chief Executive at the Zimbabwe Tourism Authority. Thank you so much, Winnie, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Julian.
Yes, Winnie, it's been a year now since you've been at the helm of the tourism body in the country. How has it been so far?
I think the word to use there is exhilarating. I think I wasn't quite, let's say, prepared for what I encountered, because I think I'd probably underestimated what is involved at the ZTA. But I can tell you that it's a very fulfilling role. It's a role that carries a lot of responsibility for the country.
Definitely.
As we are at the helm of marketing the country as a destination. And really, we are the window to the country, and that carries a huge responsibility. And over and above just promoting it, and to ensure that tourism takes its rightful place and contributes to the economy of Zimbabwe.
Yes, I can imagine, Winnie, Zimbabwe in its entirety as your product. Being a marketer myself, I'm just imagining that every facet of it becomes part of your palm. That's quite exhilarating indeed. Now, tell me, in Zimbabwe pre-COVID, the tourism industry contributed more than 7% to the country's GDP, which fell to around 4% during 2021 when COVID was at its peak. Do you think, as a country, we are in the direction to regain the lost market share?
I think we certainly can regain that market share, and we can regain the contribution that we made to the GDP of the country. Let me just say that in this year and the different platforms that I have engaged potential tourists to Zimbabwe, both leisure and business, there is great interest in the country. And we're beginning to discover potential markets that we could exploit that we had not exploited in the past. So I think surpassing pre-COVID numbers is definitely possible. I think the pointers are pointing in that direction, because year on year we've improved in all the indicators, be it room occupancy, be it international arrivals, be it domestic trips. We've just been noticing positive growth. Although we are still maybe about 30% or so off the pre-COVID numbers, but I would like to think that by the time we get to the end of 2024, we certainly would be back at pre-COVID levels.
That's exciting news indeed, to see that at least the future is bright for the tourism players, all the players within, all the facets of tourism. Look, I think everybody is geared up to make sure that we go back to our numbers before. Let's talk of airlines, Winnie. We've got Turkish Airlines, which is planning to. Ethiopian Airlines has already introduced flights into Zimbabwe. Airlink introduced the Joburg to Victoria Falls route. FastJet is also expanding its domestic route network. What does this mean for Zimbabwe's tourism and the ZTA as a tourism body?
I think generally tourism resides on access to the destination. You can have a beautiful destination, but if people cannot get to it, or they cannot get to the different resorts, then you don't really have a product to offer. But what has been interesting with all this airline activity that we see is that it's opening up new markets. You talk of Eswatini.
Yes.
I remember way back when it was Royal Swazi Airlines.
Yes, that used to,
back then that used to fly. So already that connection, the people in Swaziland are going to be curious to say what is in Zimbabwe, and for us vice versa. So it links the countries. So it allows people to be fluid and to move across the borders. You're talking about the domestic network.
Yes.
We've seen Kariba come back online. We've seen Wange come back online, and having that milk run, and then that just promotes those tourism destinations and being able to connect them. I think more so when we look at international tourists coming to the country, I think one limitation that we had in connecting the domestic destinations was that air service, because then people get there faster. When someone is on holiday for 2 weeks, they cannot spend half of that time traveling by road to be able to get from one destination to the other. So when we are able to connect these cities or these points in the country, it allows for people to stay longer and for them to see more of the country. We would like to see, obviously, that other points be connected, like your Eastern Highlands and so on. And for us to connect with even more countries, as we grow within the networks of the airlines, we also grow the base of where we can market the destination and have more people visit.
Definitely, Winnie. I can't wait for a moment where I'll fly to Nyanga from Harare for a conference, one-day trip. That would be quite excellent. And I think there's a clarion call from the chief herself to say, look, we want more airlines, particularly for the domestic routes, because this is where our domestic tourism can also be promoted. We've got so many beautiful places in the country that the locals need to visit. But outside that, I'm sure the international airlines that are coming through, and we're looking forward to more of them to come through so that Zimbabwe regains its tourist status. Recently, at a tourism seminar, it was revealed that Zimbabwe has an enormous deficit in terms of hotel rooms we need. We are looking for these people. Beds across the entire country are so much limited that we can't accommodate the number of tourists that we are anticipating. We've already read reports of investors potentially coming into Victoria Falls, for example, but seem little progress. Can you update us on this critically important issue? Because when tourists come, they need somewhere to stay.
I do say when I engage that the issue of the room stock available in Zimbabwe and the demand that is coming through is a beautiful pressure. Beautiful pressure in that at least you know that people want to come to your country. And for you to know that you don't have enough capacity. So that already points you in the direction of where your investment in the area should really be. So I think as we've been going on the different platforms to entice people to come to Zimbabwe, we've also been enticing investors to come through. And what happens in the hotel business is that the operators then team up with investors that will that will invest in the infrastructure. So of late we've been engaging financial institutions, pension funds in Zimbabwe to interest them in building property that would then pair up with hotel operators, and then we can have this kind of facility. It is not going to be an overnight solution. I mean, it takes a year and a half, 2 years for you to build a property. But we are encouraging that there is investment, because the interest really, and particularly from a MICE perspective, we see that a lot of people are wanting to come and have their meetings here, their incentive meetings, their conferencing here, exhibitions even. So we are under a beautiful pressure to make this infrastructure available.
Maybe just for the sake of the viewers, you talked of MICE. What does that mean? Probably it's a term that you use in your sector.
You see, we use it every day, that you forget that some people might not know what it is. Okay, so MICE is not those little rats that we know. But it's actually an abbreviation for meetings, incentives, conferencing, and exhibitions. So it's that line of tourism that we're changing, that we're chasing after, and really it's more business people that will travel. But you know what has also been born is a new concept called bleisure, that when people come for MICE or for business travel, then they extend their stay and they can be on leisure. So we want to be able to entice people to come whilst they do their business, and then to stay longer so that they can enjoy the facilities that we have.
Interesting concept, bleisure. So when you travel, don't just travel for business. You also need to experience the leisurely resorts or the leisurely experience that the country is offering. And there you have it from the chief herself. She's saying that in Zimbabwe, we need to brace ourselves to offer leisure to the delegates. We don't want them to go the day that the conference ends, but we want them to continue enjoying what Zimbabwe has to offer. And even for investors, is saying that there's lots of opportunity for investment, even in hotel infrastructure construction. So if you've got money, I want to encourage you that please look into the tourism sector. It's poised to grow like what Winnie is saying. Let's talk about domestic tourism, Winnie. And I think a lot of complaints or issues are coming in terms of the charges. Local are saying we are not able to enjoy our local tourist destinations because of the charges that are coming. You are looking at us as Europeans, as people that are coming from outside the country, and the charges are quite exorbitant. People are unable to. What would you say or comment in terms of promotion of local or domestic tourism?
I think the issue of pricing has come up quite a number of times as far as domestic tourism is concerned. But let me explain this way so we understand why the pricing is sometimes the way that it is.
Yes.
Is that tourism sits at the very bottom of the value chain. So tourism products are really, they're takers of cost structures from everywhere. So if someone is offering a food and beverage service, they don't have control over the pricing of bread, bacon, eggs, and all that. So when they have put together their costs, they mark up by a certain bit for them to remain profitable.
Do you control this markup? Is it determined by yourselves because you are the authority on tourism? Because I know Zimbabwe mostly our prices are a bit on the high side. Do you also guide the players in terms of the pricing?
I think we cannot regulate the pricing per se, but I think when issues like this do come, and there are complaints within the marketplace about the pricing, we engage with the operators and we try and see where can we assist them for them to be able to balance out the need for people to access their services and for them to remain profitable and sustainable. So you know, like with the recent price increases that we have experienced, industry did ask, can we meet with the minister so that we can advise him of the challenges that we are going through in trying to cost and trying to price their products and services. And in those engagements, we came up with about 3 or 4 issues that may be at monetary policy level or at fiscal level that we might be able to get some assistance that will help the operators to be able to balance out their pricing.
Yes, you talked of airlines partnering hotels in terms of the service delivery to the customers. In terms of domestic tourism, because there are so many places where aeroplanes do not go or there are no airports, how have you mobilized the local transport operators to partner with the hotels so that domestic tourism, people would want to go to Manapus, but you don't even know how to get there, the costs are, what have you done to encourage or entice the players to mobilize for that?
I'm smiling that you're asking this question because it was actually a discussion that we're having at one of our board committees yesterday to say that we need to encourage investment into luxury coach services so that people are able to get to some of these places where flights are not operating to, or those that cannot afford to fly are able to be traveling in a comfortable bus service that allows them to get through to, if it's Manapus, like you mentioned, Matusadona and all these people, Gonarejo, go even to the Eastern Highlands, that they're able to travel by road and do so by luxury coach, which we see quite a lot in other tourism destinations.
Yes.
So I think the challenge that we might have there is to have the operators organize themselves, that they can be assisted by the authority or even by the Tourism Business Council, that they can then be capacitated to offer this service.
One interesting service I've seen outside the country is of those tour buses, the open deck buses where tourists, they just enjoy the view. We've got beautiful scenery in the country, especially in Harare. We've got different facilities, areas. I'll talk of where I come from in Epworth. We've got the Epworth balancing rocks. Growing up there, we used to see a lot of people from different countries coming to view the rocks. And I think as the tourism board, you need to play a pivotal role in terms of promoting these, not only to the locals. Because if you ask somebody who stays next door, they don't even know what that place looks like. From a marketing point of view, Does ZTA get itself involved in marketing these places?
So places like this that are not developed, as in there are no operators that are actually organized within that area.
Yes.
We're trying to highlight this to investors. And you know, the investors that we've been targeting for places like your Epworth, like your Domboshao, all these little hidden gems, as we call them, that are in our backyard,
Yes.
that allow people to do something over the weekend, for kids to go on school trips and things like that, is we've been reaching out to the diaspora.
Okay.
Because some of these investments are not, we're not looking for a multi-million-dollar investment in this, but something that where one has saved, and they say, what can I invest in back home?
Yes.
How about having a restaurant at the Balancing
At
Rocks,
Balancing Rocks.
where people come through and they have a lunch?
Yeah.
So those are some of the investments that, as we've been going around and engaging with the diaspora, is to say, if you have $20,000, why don't you come and put up this infrastructure? There's this opportunity here, and all these opportunities here.
Yes, and I think that gospel winning needs to be preached almost even not only to the diasporan investors, even to the local investors, because those places, I tell you, from my personal experience, they've got lots of potential, and that's how we can entice domestic tourism, because there need to be quite a number of activities in our local tourist places. Now let's go to the international tourists. How are you promoting Destination Zimbabwe to tourists beyond the borders?
Okay, so what we've done internationally is that we have traditional markets where the tourists have come through over the years. Your Europe's, the US, Australia. But then as we've been going around, we've also discovered what we could call emerging markets, or markets that are untapped, but there is great potential. And one of these markets is the whole GCC, or that Middle Eastern bloc.
Yes.
Because I think over the years we've wanted the Emiratis to come here. But the royals are not going to come here. I don't think we have a product that we could offer them. But I think we were missing a grand opportunity in the expatriate community that works in this. Because we just came back from the UAE about a month and a half ago. And in the UAE alone, they were saying they have a population of 5 million expatriates. Wow. And these are people that are working across all sorts of industries, from construction to hospitality, and they have the money to be able to spend. So these are some of the markets that we're going after, and you've seen the collaborations that we will have with Emirates. They are targeting this segment, that they'd be able to come through to Zimbabwe. We have not fully exploited the US.
Yes.
Africa is out there. We encourage people to holiday within the continent. We can all go to Europe, we can all go to the US. But imagine if you're living in West Africa and you've never been to the Victoria Falls.
Imagine. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense when it's in your backyard. Yeah?
Interestingly, I was just laughing at the new innovation that has been done outside the country, where they've developed their own Africa.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah. And we are wondering, people are going to those stretches to attract tourists so that they don't come to Africa. But look, we've got you keeping us safe and making sure that the essence of Africa is experienced. So we talked of domestic tourism, we talked of international tourism, we talked of the impact of the airlines. As the tourism board, what other areas are you prioritizing probably in your strategies to make sure that we get back to beyond the 7% we have been to in terms of contribution to GDP?
I think some of the things that the ZTA is less known for is how we capacitate industry, how we regulate industry, if I can say. So we have a program that we call Service Excellence, where we have trainers that go into the different facilities, designated tourism facilities, that are registered with the ZTA, and they offer soft skills training. So issues to do with service. And I think coming out of COVID, that is the one thing that we really need to work around to ensure that our service levels are at international standards. This industry is very competitive.
Yes.
A few days ago, someone showed me a video that was showing the tourism arrivals in Africa over the last 20 years. And as the video plays, it shows you the countries going up and down in different positions. And you could see Zimbabwe was fluctuating between number 4 to number 7, and it keeps going up and down. But if you don't keep watch of that, it's very easy for you to slip out of your positions, because other countries are not waiting. They're also being innovative. They're aggressive in their marketing and their promotion and so on. So we have to keep our service levels up. A lot of the establishments are going through refurbishments because you know that the tastes have changed since COVID.
Sure,
COVID
definitely.
came and changed people,
Yes.
So we have to keep up with that, the different tastes. You know, who are we competing with to ensure that, you know, and also collaboration. You realize that if most of our international guests are coming from long-haul destinations, so if they're coming to this part of the world, they're not coming to see one country.
Yes.
If they have 2 weeks and they could go to 3 countries, they will do that. But we want to make sure that we are in every itinerary of a person that is visiting Southern Africa.
Definitely, we need to be the core. I mean, in terms of thinking and planning of traveling, especially for our visitors that are coming from Europe. You know, when you talk of Africa, Zimbabwe, because of its physical position, we should be the landing destination. Then they go to other countries.
Yes.
And there you have it, viewers from the tourism chief herself saying that in Zimbabwe we need to polish our service excellence, because this is what defines us as Zimbabwe. Moving to a different conversation, when you have talked about tourism, and in your introduction you talked of being the ambassador rather of Brand Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Let's talk briefly about nation branding, which is very, very critical for the country. My simple question to you is, what do you think Brand Zimbabwe is, if you are to describe it in a few lines to anyone that cares to listen?
I think if you were to ask me and my personal opinion, I'll tell you that what comes to mind when I think Zimbabwe is resilience and longevity.
Okay.
And resilience in that it's depicted even in our iconic tourism resorts.
Okay.
If you look at Great Zimbabwe, it's been standing for centuries.
Yes.
If you see the Victoria Falls, it's been carved over many years. If you see the Eastern Highlands, they've been there for centuries. But if we look at even our own people, if we come through from the liberation struggle and what the country has gone through to get through to its independence, the economic challenges that we've had over the years, but we're still here,
Yes.
we're still standing, and we're still competing against the best of the world. So I think if you were to say Zimbabwe, the first word that comes to my mind is resilience. And longevity.
And longevity. There you have it, viewers. Resilience and longevity for Zimbabwe. On a lighter note, there's always been a debate between who owns the Victoria Falls, between our friends from across the Zambezi and ourselves. That's Zambia. What is your opinion when you're talking to people?
I think on a lighter note, if I start there, I had a colleague who also worked in Zambia, always said, Zimbabwe is the bride, so you see her face. So from Zimbabwe, you can see her face, and from Zambia, you only see her veil. But I think on a more serious note, I think it is a shared resource.
Yes.
And I think over the last year or so, we've been engaging quite seriously with Zambia to say that, look, we have this shared resource. Is there any joy in us competing over this resource? But rather, let's join forces and make sure that we market it to the best of both our countries, and we gain from it equally. And coming out of the tourism in Durban, I was engaging with my colleague from Zambia, and I said, you know, when we come back to Indaba next year and all the other travel shows that we go to, let's always make sure that our stands are back to back or right next to each other, so no one is mistaken where the Victoria Falls is. And whatever is going to be demarcating our stand is going to be either a picture of the Victoria Falls, an LED screen of the Victoria Falls, and then we promote it that way.
Yes, I think that's very, very critical, because there's always been a debate on who owns the Victoria Falls, because the river really comes from Zambia, and it flows into the Zimbabwean border. So we've got the best view, in fact, as Zimbabwe. But like she's saying, we just need to have a shared vision about the Victoria Falls, not to say it belongs to Zimbabwe, it belongs to Zambia. Otherwise, it is the Zimbabweans who will still win the argument. So I'm just encouraging my colleagues in Zambia. Well, that's it for today on All Things Marketing with Gillian Rusike. Remember to join us again next week at 2100 hours on ZTNPRIME channel 294 as we critique and celebrate marketing practices as well as profile trendsetters and new entrants in the sector. We can also continue the conversations on our social media platforms. We would love to hear your feedback. From me, Gillian Rusike, and the crew behind the scenes, we wish you well. Thank you.